I'm Miranda, 27 years old, and a few months ago I stood in a courtroom while my father pointed at me like I was something rotten he'd found under his shoe. This girl only knows how to waste what she doesn't deserve, he said loud enough for every single reporter to hear. His lawyer was grinning like a man who thought the game was already won, and the judge, his old friend, Martin Crawford, nodded like they were sharing an inside joke. That nod told me everything. This wasn't justice. This was a setup. They thought they'd crush me quietly. But they had no idea what I'd been preparing for. Before that moment, before the judge's hands started shaking and the press leaned forward like wolves smelling blood, this story started 27 years ago. It started with a man who never wanted to be a father. Congressman Richard Hayes built his career on family values, but when my mother died giving birth to me, he blamed me for it. He didn't hold me. He didn't visit. He didn't even name me. My grandparents did. While he was in D.C. shaking hands, Grandma Patricia and Grandpa William carried me out of the hospital wrapped in a yellow blanket. And from that day on, they were the ones who raised me. Not him. I grew up in a house that smelled like cinnamon in winter and roses in summer. Grandpa read bedtime stories with his reading glasses slipping down his nose. Grandma painted watercolors on Sunday mornings with sunlight hitting her silver hair. Christmas was always warm and bright, except for the phone that never rang. Grandma used to keep it on the table during dinner, pretending not to check it every 5 minutes. Grandpa would clear his throat and bring me another cookie so I wouldn't notice. But I noticed. Even when I was 5, I knew something was missing. The first time I asked why my dad never came, Grandma's smile cracked for just a second. He's very busy helping people, sweetheart, she said. I nodded. I didn't understand politics, but I understood lies. While my friends went to father-daughter dances with suits and ties, Grandpa showed up in his old gray jacket, spinning me across the floor like a gentleman who didn't care what anyone thought. Parent-teacher conferences, birthdays, piano recitals. I saw Grandma and Grandpa in every seat where he should have been. But on TV, he was everywhere. Congressman Hayes, defender of family, protector of children. I'd see him giving speeches about building stronger homes and supporting family values, and I'd sit there on the couch next to Grandma thinking, yeah. Tell me more about family, Dad. By the time I turned 16, I'd stopped asking about him. But Grandma and Grandpa never stopped hoping. Every Christmas, they'd call. Every birthday, they'd try. And every time, he'd say he was too busy. And they'd pretend it didn't hurt. I went to Duke on a partial scholarship. Grandma cried. Grandpa threw me a celebration so big the neighbors came over to peek through the windows. My father sent a typed card. No signature. Just a printed name. That was the year I stopped pretending I cared. After college, I came home. Not because I wanted to, but because Grandma started forgetting things. First little things, then everything. I'll never forget the day I found her standing in the kitchen with a pot on the stove and no idea why she'd turned it on. Early onset Alzheimer's. I quit my job and stayed. Because when the people who raise you give you everything, you don't leave them when their memories start fading. For 2 years, I watched her slip away. Some days she remembered me. Some days she thought I was a nurse. Grandpa held her hand every night like if he held on tight enough, she wouldn't disappear. But she did. She died asking for my father. He never showed up, not even to the funeral. 3 days later, he called, not to ask how Grandpa was, not to say sorry, not to pretend to care. He asked about the lake house. The house that had been in her family for 4 generations. I'll never forget Grandpa's voice on the phone, shaking with rage. She's not even buried yet, Richard. Your mother is dead, and you're calling about property. That night, I saw the man who had never raised his voice slam the phone down like it had betrayed him. Something broke in Grandpa that night. The hope. The part of him that kept defending a son who'd never earned it. For 3 quiet years after that, it was just me and him. He taught me everything about the family businesses, not because I asked, but because he trusted me. You're the only one who's ever been here, he said once. The only one who shows up. I thought he meant emotionally. I didn't realize he meant legally, too. He died on a gray March morning, sitting in his favorite chair with the newspaper still folded on his lap. It looked like he'd just fallen asleep. But the house felt wrong. Too quiet, too empty. And then Mr. Peterson, the family lawyer, came with a sealed envelope with my name written on it. Your grandfather anticipated complications, he said gently. I should have known then. The will reading was a week later. And guess who decided to finally show up in person? Congressman Richard Hayes, my father, in his best suit, his best grieving face, like the cameras were already rolling. Mr. Peterson started reading. To my son, Richard Hayes, I leave my complete disappointment in the man he chose to become, and my sincere hope that one day he'll understand what he lost. The silence was so sharp it almost hummed. To my beloved granddaughter, Miranda Hayes, who has shown more love and loyalty in 27 years than her father has in his entire life, I leave the entirety of my estate. I didn't look at him. I didn't need to. I could feel the rage coming off him like heat. The next week was hell. First came the headlines. Congressman's daughter accused of manipulating elderly grandfather. Gold digger granddaughter in the family fortune. Then came the camera crews outside my house. Then the lawyers. It wasn't just an inheritance fight. It was a war. And then I saw it. A photograph in a local paper. My father and Judge Martin Crawford laughing together at a fundraiser. The same Martin Crawford who'd been assigned to my case. The same man who'd been shaking my father's hand for years. I'd seen them in pictures before, but I'd never paid attention. This time, it felt like ice down my spine. I spent 3 weeks digging. Old campaign sites, fundraiser photos, political donation records, 15 years of backroom smiles and golf outings. I built a folder, because if they were going to come for me, I wasn't going down quietly. The day of the hearing, the courthouse was packed. Reporters, lawyers, onlookers who smelled blood. My father walked in like he owned the building. Crisp suit, flag pin, fake grief. I didn't look at him. I focused on the manila folder in my lap. His lawyer spoke first. He painted me as some manipulative girl who isolated a vulnerable old man. The judge nodded along like a puppet. My lawyer spoke next. It didn't matter. The judge was already on their side. I could see it in the way he looked at me, like the outcome was already decided. Then I stood up. Your Honor, I said, holding the folder. Before you make your ruling, there's something the court should see. The first photo, Crawford and my father at a fundraiser. The second, at a golf tournament. The third, private dinner with their families. The fourth, fifth, sixth, 15 years worth. Miss Hayes, the judge stammered. This is irrelevant. No, I said calmly. This is a record of a personal relationship spanning 15 years between you and the man trying to take everything my grandparents built. A relationship that makes it impossible for this court to pretend it's neutral. The courtroom went dead silent. Reporters leaned forward like they'd just smelled blood. And then my father snapped. He stood up, pointed at me like he'd rehearsed this moment his whole life, and screamed, "This girl only knows how to waste what she doesn't deserve." And Judge Crawford nodded, just like that, instinctively, a little twitch of the head. But it was enough. Thank you, I said quietly. That's all I needed. My voice was steady. His wasn't. His face turned red, then pale, then red again as he realized what had just happened. The cameras had caught it. The reporters had caught it. The world had caught it. There was no taking it back. I looked straight at the judge. If you rule in his favor, every single one of these photos will be made public. Every donation, every appearance, every connection, and the world will know exactly why you gave him what he wanted. The judge's hands shook. 30 minutes later, the will was upheld. My inheritance remained untouched. Judge Crawford fled the bench like the room was on fire. He resigned the following week. My father's little machine started to crack. Ethics investigations followed. Reporters dug deeper. His family values speeches started sounding like a punchline. Within months, the man who built his career on lies was standing in the ruins of it. I didn't have to destroy him. I just had to let the truth breathe. I kept everything my grandparents left me. The house, the businesses, the legacy, but most importantly, I kept my peace. I rebuilt the company with values Grandpa actually believed in. No politics, no lies, just work that mattered. I created profit sharing, invested in the community, built something he couldn't touch. Because power built on lies crumbles fast. But what they built, that lasts. 8 months later, I met David at a sustainability conference. He didn't care about my last name. He cared about what I was building. We talked for hours. About values. About what matters. A year later, we were married in the same church where I said goodbye to Grandma and Grandpa. We turned the house back into a home. His office where Grandpa's study was. A nursery where Grandma painted. Our daughter, Patricia Rose, was born on a bright spring morning. A year later, our son, William David. They'll never wonder if they were wanted. They'll never wait by the phone. They'll grow up knowing exactly what family means. My father chased power his entire life. And in the end, it left him alone. Me? I inherited something far more valuable than money. I inherited love, loyalty, strength, the kind you can't buy, steal, or fake. And the best part? When the man who pointed at me in court tried to make me feel small, I stood taller than he ever could. If you've ever been underestimated by your own blood, remember, silence isn't weakness. Preparation isn't fear, and when the truth finally lands, it lands hard. That's what happened in that courtroom. He pointed, he shouted, he thought the system was his. But I walked out owning my life. And his empire? It collapsed. For once, not because someone took it away, because it had nothing real to stand on. And that's what happens when you bet against someone who learned strength from love instead of power. This girl didn't waste what she didn't deserve. This girl kept everything he threw away. And she built something stronger. The storm didn't end when the judge banged his gavel. That was just the detonation. The blast wave came after. For days, I couldn't open my phone without seeing my father's face on every news site. The image that went viral wasn't him smiling on a campaign trail or shaking hands with donors. It was that moment in court, him pointing at me, his face twisted with anger, and the judge's unconscious nod. Someone had snapped the photo at the perfect second. It looked like everything it was. Power trying to crush someone it thought couldn't fight back. And the public recognized it. They weren't seeing a politician defending fairness. They were seeing a father trying to strip his own daughter of what her grandparents left her. They were seeing corruption naked and ugly. His communications team tried to spin it at first. A private family matter. A misunderstanding. But how do you spin a judge caught nodding along like a trained dog? How do you explain away 15 years of photos that I dropped like grenades on the courtroom floor? You don't. Every outlet picked it up. Local reporters, then national, then the investigative journalists he used to charm at fundraisers started digging. They followed the money from his campaign to the judge's charity golf tournaments, to overlapping donors, to backroom dinners. The ethics committee didn't even wait for the public pressure. They opened an inquiry within a week. It was like watching a tower fall in slow motion, except I wasn't the one pushing. Gravity was. The first time I saw him after that day wasn't in a courtroom. It was in a parking lot outside his favorite country club. I didn't go there to see him. I was meeting someone for lunch. But there he was, walking fast, shoulders tight, sunglasses hiding eyes that used to shine on TV screens. When he saw me, he froze like a man seeing a ghost. For the first time in my life, Richard Hayes looked small. Not powerful, not composed. Small. "Miranda," he said, his voice hoarse. No cameras, no audience, just him and me. I didn't flinch. I didn't lower my eyes. I used to imagine this moment 1,000 times when I was younger, the moment he'd finally see me. A part of me thought it would feel like victory. But it didn't. It felt quiet. "You're proud of yourself?" he asked, low, bitter. "No," I said simply. "I'm done being scared of you." He opened his mouth, maybe to argue, maybe to pretend like I didn't just burn down his carefully built narrative, but nothing came out. He walked away without looking back. That was the last conversation we had face to face. The investigation dragged on for months, but the conclusion was inevitable. Judge Crawford resigned, citing health concerns, but everyone knew why. The State Judicial Review Board opened its own file, and whispers turned into headlines. Congressman's ally under fire. Judicial ethics breach. The judge disappeared from public view. His house went up for sale quietly. No statements. No press conferences. Just silence. My father lasted longer. He always did. He'd spent a career building a fortress of image and influence. But even fortresses fall when the foundation rots. First, his donors started backing away. Then the whispers in D.C. got louder. The Ethics Committee launched its formal investigation into potential misuse of influence to sway judicial outcomes. His political enemies didn't need to do anything. They just let the story breathe. The night the ethics inquiry was announced, I sat alone on the porch with a cup of tea and listened to the crickets. No shouting, no triumph, just air that felt a little clearer than before. For years, I had lived in the shadow of a man who didn't see me as family, just as something inconvenient. And now that shadow was lifting. It was strange. The thing about finally standing up to someone who's controlled your story your whole life is that when it's over, there's just space. Space to build something real. Space to breathe. I spent the first month after the trial avoiding reporters. They camped outside the house, shoved microphones at me, shouted questions. How does it feel to destroy your father's career? Did you plan this? What do you say to people calling you the whistleblower daughter? Whistleblower. Funny word for someone who just told the truth out loud. Eventually, the noise faded. They found new scandals to feed on. But the impact didn't fade with it. The businesses Grandpa left me, the ones he trusted me with, needed leadership. Real leadership. And I wasn't about to let everything he built turn into another power tool for someone else. I walked into that first board meeting with my hands shaking and my heart pounding, because power isn't just about fighting monsters. It's about stepping into the place they thought you'd never stand. All those faces around the table, men who used to deal with grandpa, investors who probably expected a lawyer to take over, stared at me like I was an untested child. I didn't give them a speech. I gave them a plan. I told them about new profit sharing, new environmental standards, community programs, expansion that didn't bleed the people who worked for us dry. I saw eyebrows rise, a few smiles, a few glares, but I didn't care. I wasn't there to be liked. I was there because my grandparents raised me with values my father never understood. If you build something, it should outlast you. Those first few months were a blur. Long nights, early mornings, meetings where I had to fight twice as hard to be taken seriously because some of them saw me as the girl who embarrassed a congressman. But results speak louder than old reputations. And slowly, one by one, they stopped underestimating me. Meanwhile, my father's fortress kept crumbling. The congressional hearings became public. I didn't attend, but people sent me clips. Him sitting there, pale and tired, as they read the list of ethics violations. Campaign finance irregularities, undisclosed relationships with a sitting judge, dozens of favors exchanged over years. The man who once commanded rooms with a smile couldn't even look up from the table. He announced his resignation from Congress with a statement full of empty words about family and rebuilding. Everyone knew what it really was: surrender dressed in polite language. I wish I could say I felt triumphant. I didn't. I felt free. For the first time in my life, his name didn't hang over mine like a brand I never asked for. I wasn't the congressman's daughter anymore. I was Miranda Hayes, the woman who took everything he tried to bury and built something out of it. I started getting invited to conferences I'd never imagined. Sustainability panels, community investment forums. People didn't just want my last name anymore, they wanted my perspective. The irony was sharp. My father had spent a lifetime demanding respect through power. I was earning it by showing up and telling the truth. And then there was David. I met him at a clean energy summit. He was standing at a booth talking about sustainable manufacturing processes with this quiet kind of confidence that wasn't about proving anything. I liked that immediately. He didn't recognize my name. Or if he did, he didn't care. He asked me questions about what I was building, not what I'd inherited. We talked for hours. He told me he didn't care much for politics. I laughed harder than I had in months. We met again. And again. It wasn't a whirlwind romance. It was something steadier, like learning to breathe again after holding it too long. While the world moved on from the scandal, my father didn't. He tried to contact me twice. I didn't pick up the first time. The second time, he sent a letter, handwritten, probably for the first time in decades. The handwriting was shaky. I read it alone in the kitchen at midnight. He said he regretted how things turned out. Not what he'd done, not the years he'd ignored me. Just how things turned out. He said I'd embarrassed him, humiliated him, but that he hoped we could still be family. Family. The word felt hollow coming from him. A word he'd used on campaign stages but never lived in real life. I didn't respond, not out of hate, just indifference. There are wounds that stop bleeding but never forget they were cut. David moved in after 6 months. It wasn't a grand gesture. He just started bringing over coffee in the mornings and leaving clothes in the dresser. It felt right. I never wanted to build a castle like my father. I wanted a home. A year after the trial, the house felt alive again. I renovated Grandma's art room into a space full of light. David built a small greenhouse in the backyard. I stopped waking up in the middle of the night expecting to hear reporters outside. But every so often, I'd get an email. A message. Someone thanking me for standing up in that courtroom. A young woman whose father had tried to take her inheritance. A man whose family tried to erase him. Strangers who saw themselves in that viral photo of a girl standing alone while power pointed at her and sneered. It's strange being a symbol for something you never meant to become. I wasn't a hero. I was just someone who got tired of being quiet. But if my story made one person feel less alone, then maybe it mattered more than I thought. My father's trial never came. They settled everything quietly behind closed doors. He kept enough money to live comfortably. He lost everything else that gave him weight. He moved out of state, I heard. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere where no one called him congressman. I don't hate him. I don't forgive him, either. I just don't give him space in my head anymore. When our daughter was born, I sat in the same kitchen where Grandma used to hum while she cooked and thought about the way cycles end. How one man's cruelty doesn't have to echo through generations. How sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't loud. It's living the life they said you couldn't. David held Patricia Rose in his arms like she was made of gold. And I thought of my grandparents. Of how they showed me that family isn't blood. It's the people who stay when no one else does. I built new traditions. No more waiting by the phone on Christmas. No more staring at empty seats. Our house is full, loud, messy, real. My father never met my children. And honestly, I'm okay with that. They deserve better stories. Every now and then, his name pops up in some article about disgraced politicians. I scroll past it. It's not my burden anymore. The funny thing is, when you grow up under someone like him, you start to believe your story is tied to theirs. That your identity is wrapped up in what they did or didn't do. But it's not. It never was. It took me years and one very loud courtroom to realize I'd always had the power to write my own ending. If there's one thing I learned, it's this. People who underestimate you will build entire castles out of their confidence. But they never build foundations. And when the truth comes, even the loudest castles crumble like sand. My grandparents taught me to love fiercely. My father taught me how to fight quietly. Life taught me when to let go. And somehow, that combination turned into something unbreakable. The garden behind the house is my favorite place at sunset. David's flowers bloom in rows. Our kids chase each other through the grass, their laughter sharp and bright in the air. Sometimes I sit on the porch and close my eyes and remember Grandma humming and Grandpa reading, and I realize their love didn't end when they died. It became this. It became everything. My father thought my silence meant weakness. He thought pointing at me in court would make me crumble. But silence isn't surrender. It's loading the bullet before the truth fires. I didn't destroy him. He destroyed himself. And me? I just walked away with everything he threw away. I built something stronger. And it's mine. I used to think the end of this story would look like a courtroom win. Like a dramatic gavel slam, flashing cameras, my father walking away defeated. But the truth is, endings don't sound like thunder. They're quiet. They happen in small, ordinary moments when you realize you're no longer afraid. For me, the real ending happened on a warm evening when the air smelled like roses. I was sitting on the porch with Patricia curled against my chest and William chasing fireflies in the yard. David was laughing somewhere behind me, his voice mixing with the sound of our children. That's when it hit me. This house isn't heavy anymore. It's alive again. For so long, I carried the weight of a man who didn't know how to love. I let his absence carve out parts of me I thought would never fill. But love has a way of growing in the cracks. My grandparents planted it, my choices watered it, and now, here it was, blooming louder than his name ever could. My father exists somewhere far away now, in a quiet house with no cameras, no power, no audience. And me? I don't check the news anymore. I don't wait for apologies. Some stories don't need clean endings. They just need you to walk away. I'll never forget the moment he pointed at me in court. But it's no longer a wound. It's a scar, proof of what I survived. Proof of what I became. When people ask me what happened between us, I tell them this. He taught me what kind of person I refused to be. And my grandparents taught me everything else. This legacy, this house, this laughter, none of it was given by him. It was built by the people who loved me when he didn't. And now, every night, when I lock the front door and listen to my children breathing softly down the hallway, I know, I won. Not in court, not in headlines, but right here, because in the end, the best revenge isn't destroying the people who tried to break you. It's living a life so full they don't exist in it anymore. This is my story, not his, mine, and it's only just beginning.